Well, dual use is actually a rather old terminology. It's mainly coined by export controls, and the meaning was that it describes things like goods, technology, but also know-how that can be used for civilian, but also military purposes. Now, in the advent of events, especially in the terrorist scene, like we've seen already in the 90s and also in this millennium, the focus went broader, and today dual use is seen as something for beneficial purposes, but that can also be used for harmful purposes. So not just goods, but also know-how and technology.
To be honest, as a scientist in the lab who works with viruses and human pathogens, it's not an everyday topic to discuss dual-use dilemmas and risks of your research. We should all do this more often. And today's discussion with the other panelists, who were just really great and entertaining, showed me that it's important that we make this discussion fun and realistic and really discuss it with hands-on examples, like the viruses we do in the lab. How could they harm others, and how could the ideas that we develop be misused? So make the discussion fun, but really discuss.
On a worldwide scale, with terrorist attacks that happened, for instance in Tokyo in the subway system, due to the Aum Shinrikyo doomsday cult that carried out successful attacks with sarin gas. This, together with what happened right after 9/11 with the anthrax letter scare, the focus, especially in terms of security, has shifted. So also things like life science research papers, for instance, are now in the limelight in terms of security assessments.
So I really enjoyed the discussion and the presentation by Cedric and Misuse, because I think it's really important, especially right now because of the newer technologies that are coming out, that we have this discussion across disciplines. So not just in medicine or not just in biomedicine, but across ethicists as well as other biologists and the regulators. I think at the regulatory level we need discussion between scientists and regulators, and not just within Switzerland or within Europe, but across the entire continent or across the world.
Yeah, so I would expect from the regulator point of view that you would have some rules to follow, that you would have regulations regarding the use of biological material or pathogens or anything that you'd be using in your research that would be sort of deemed that you would need to report it. But I would also expect it to be reasonable. So, I mean, that you wouldn't have to list every single thing that you might use for a very short period of time, but you would have to have a comprehensive protocol and a comprehensive list of your pathogens or your dangerous chemicals. So I think that so far this is quite well implemented in Switzerland. So there are rules and people are inclined to follow the rules in Switzerland, which I think is really good.
What we see all too often is basically a level of ignorance that there is actually dual use also in research occurring. Like in the US now, for instance, there is a terminology that describes very broadly dual use research. That's why the question arose, well, what's really of concern? And then the advisory board in the US came up with a new definition that tried to frame the whole dual-use thing that is of real concern with the dual-use research of concern terminology. And it frames it to things, knowledge, know-how, technology that pose, that can be directly misapplied, pose a significant threat with broad potential consequences. But that said, it's still very ill-defined, and I think it's for the researchers that they are best suited to be able to decide, well, what's really of concern and what's not. But to take these kinds of informed decisions, it's necessary to be aware that there is such a thing as a dual-use problem.
It's very interesting to discuss with people who are actually aware of the dual-use problem, and raising awareness obviously is a big concern for almost everybody. The take-home message for me is that this is not the point where we should stop, but that we actually just started, and that now we reach a point where we can start discussing about exact values and regulations we want to work with, about controlling procedures, and also about mechanism, what we want to do with people who are not willing to conduct secure research.
For me, one of the most important aspects is that the communication goes on. So everybody was talking about communication, how important it is, but I think we are not able to measure the impact of communication in some sense. So, and communication changes over time, the topics change over time, and I think we really need to communicate more and more and to keep it alive and meet again and again and again, even though sometimes it feels like we talk not to each other, but everybody talks about his own topic, that we still meet again and still try to overcome our own language barriers.